And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of We Got Next. I am Rickey Hampton, along with the big fella, Big Paul Mokeski, Big Mo. Want to welcome everybody in. As always, we welcome your questions and comments. We have a great show tonight. And Mo, we got a special guest in the house tonight. I'm going to let you
Yeah,
do the honors of introducing this young man.
yeah, we got a longtime friend, NBA expert, reporter from Milwaukee. He's been around, knows everything, knows the insides and outsides. We're probably going to scoop on the Bucks situation. So Gary Wolfell is our guest tonight. Welcome, Gary.
Well, thank you for having me, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to it.
Man, we are looking forward to having you. Hey, it is Mo. You know, you and I, we love this time of year, man. And I'm sure you. I know you do too, Gary, as a longtime NBA reporter. The playoffs are here. We got uh, uh, the Knicks and Heat going on right now. Last time I checked, it was 67-62 uh, Heat in the third quarter. The number eight seed looks like the better team in this series so far, Mo. Your thoughts on
Yeah,
what you've seen with the Knicks and Heat?
yeah. I mean, like we talked about before, the seedings and ranks in the playoffs this year are you should throw them out the window. I mean, Miami's the AC, but they're way better than that. You go out to Golden State is the sixth seed. The Lakers are the seventh seed out west, and that's not even true. So rankings. My beloved Milwaukee Bucks lost to the AC. Miami. But really, Miami's better than the AC. But that doesn't take much of the sting out, especially that it looks like Miami's going to go up 3-1 against the Knicks, and that's who the Bucks are supposed to be playing right now, and finishing them off and get ready for the Philly Boston winner. But Miami, like we've talked before, they have talent all up and down the roster. They have a great background, and they're playing the best at the best time. They're on a roll, just like the Atlanta Hawks got on a roll a couple of years ago.
Good
Just at the
point.
right time, Miami's getting on a roll and playing great basketball at the right time at the end of the season.
Hey, Gary, your thoughts on not only this series but the playoffs in general so far this year.
You know what? I've actually been really impressed with the playoffs. It was almost like God was looking down on Adam Silver with these matchups. I mean, all these matchups are riveting. The Golden State Lakers one. I mean, the ratings are off the chart. For those games, and whether it's in the Eastern Conference or Western Conference, the matchups have just been dynamite.
Yeah, I mean, look at Boston Philly, which is an old school matchup, and they got great teams. And then the Denver Sun series that was just tied up over the weekend. I mean, you look at the starting five for the Suns is out of this world, and then you got the Joker and Jamal Murray with Denver
Yeah.
playing really well. I mean, all series are very exciting, except it looks like the Knicks and the Miami is not going to be as exciting as we thought it would be.
Yeah, that Suns series. I mean, it's been phenomenal. You knew going in that it was going to be, a really highly contested series. But my gosh, I mean, you think of it. There's what, three Hall of Famers in that game, Paul? Maybe. I mean, you figure Jokic is a lock, right? And you figure Durant's a lock, and I would imagine at some point Booker will be a lock.
And,
Um,
and Chris Paul.
Oh, exactly, Chris Paul. And then if you want to push it and say potentially, because the guy obviously has been plagued by injuries, but Jamal Murray, I mean, he's a fabulous player.
Yeah, I want to get your feed on this, Gary. Like I heard today, and it might be a valid point. When everybody thought that the injury to Chris Paul, and we know he's been hurt in the playoffs before at the wrong time, and he got hurt a couple games ago. and everybody was, thinking the Suns are done and that's it. But really, what happened was, in my opinion, it made the Suns coach play his bench, and his bench outscored the Denver bench 40-11 last night. So, if Chris Paul is still in the lineup, I don't know if those guys play, and who knows what happens. So you never know in basketball, especially a 7-game series, which way it'll swing.
Yeah, you brought up Chris Paul's name. When he came out of college from Wake Forest, the Bucks had a high draft pick, and they had T.J. Ford. Remember him?
Yeah, from Texas.
He was, yeah, he was on their roster, and he was going to be the guy. And I remember writing a column saying, "Hey, you know what? T.J. Ford could be the guy, but there aren't too many Chris Pauls that come along." And here we are. How many years later? And Chris Paul has obviously had a Hall of Fame career. But getting back to your point, Paul, I think they're a much better team without Chris Paul on the floor. I think the ball distribution is much better, and it gives Booker and Durant more opportunity, to crank it up. So, Monty Williams, if I'm Monty Williams, I'm saying, Chris, you might want to take the series off.
I know. I mean, and it quickens the pace for Phoenix, and they're more up and down. And let's face it, I mean, Chris Paul isn't what he used to be, but he still will absorb 15 to 20 shots in a game, and those shots go to other people, even like Ayton, that can keep him more interested in playing because, we all know he's kind of temperamental, it seems like now, and he gets all discouraged and pouts a little bit. But now if you give him some shots here and that, instead of 5 shots, he gets 8 or 10. That makes a big difference for someone like that. So, yeah, I mean, timing.
But can you really, because it's been obvious they definitely look better without Chris Paul. Is that something that's just short term or specifically for this matchup? Or, as you say, he's not the same guy. He's still a good player, but.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, if Chris Paul says I'm healthy next game and I can play, he's going to start and he's going to play 30 minutes. So as a coach, you're not going to have anything to say about that. But, I think as what I've seen, I think it is, it's about matchups also. And, I don't think you want to have a slow pace when you have someone like Joker that, can catch the ball in the low post, high post, and do whatever he wants and pound it in the post. And if you're trying to go mano on mano and try to play half court with the Denver Nuggets, I don't think you're going to win that game. And so this kind of forces Phoenix to play more up tempo and get open floor. Which, guess what? That puts the Joker in some trouble in on defense because he has to get up and down and guard people out on the floor. And I think there's a couple situations where Ayton ran the floor and outran him and sealed and got some baskets. So, with a player like the Joker, like we do against great players, they're going to get theirs, but you need to make it difficult for them on offense, and then you got to punish them on defense. Now, that might be guard someone small, or it might be just run him, make him run. Instead of jog up and down, he's got to run, and that'll affect him in the long run.
Hey Mo, how would you guard him?
I would just, pray and hope. No.
No, you would have a plan. That if you have a plan, if you had a plan for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you would have a plan for the Joker.
Well, I think he's so strong, and I don't think it would be my plan. It would be the team's plan because if you watch what I'm trying to think. What Boston has been doing to Embiid, they've been double teaming him once he dribbles the ball and making him pass the ball. And I think even though Joker's a great passer, you need to throw different things at him. You got to front him, play behind him, be physical. You got to trap him from the top sometimes on the dribble. You got to mix things up because if you're going to let him catch and pound you 3 or 4 dribbles, it's all over. So I would play him physical, and I'm sorry, but I would push him to his left if I could get him to go that way and maybe take a charge on him heaven forbid, flop maybe. But, you need to make it difficult for him. But the other thing that I noticed the other day, he's so freaking strong And he had a chance at 3 or 4 3-point plays, old fashioned, because they're not fouling him hard enough. They're hitting him, but he's going through it. If you're going to foul him, you need to foul him.
See, what's funny, Gary? I thought I was going to get Mo through the conversation without him talking about giving him a little bone.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
They don't make sense.
He almost made it through the conversation without giving him a bit more bone.
They don't make centers like they used to, right, Paul?
No, they don't.
I mean, you look at, they're trapping and throwing different things at Embiid. I mean, last game, I know his knee's probably not right, but I bet when I was watching, I bet they blocked 4 or 5 of Embiid's shot last game.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't win the game in the out, they made it hell for him, and that's what you got to do to Joker.
Yeah.
The other thing about Embiid, I mean, you both have seen a lot of centers, and I wrote about this some time ago. I think Jokic is the greatest passing big man I've ever seen, and I've been covering or watching the NBA since probably the mid 60s, late 60s. And, I saw Sabonis and I saw Walton. Do you guys agree or how would you stack those guys up as passers?
I would put him up there. Sabonis, even though his past his prime, we all know that was a great passer. And Bill Walton in his prime, Portland was a phenomenal passer. You know what, Gary? And you saw an underrated center passer that I know, Jack Sikma. Jack Sikma was he would post up and pass behind the back to guys and do stuff, but he's not the level of the Joker, but I would put him up there with the best passing centers of all time for sure.
Another guy, Paul, I think that is kind of under the radar as a passer was Andrew Bogut. And, he was plagued by injuries throughout his career, but he was a fantastic passer. I mean, he made the tough pass look easy, and he wasn't as flamboyant as Jokic. I mean, Jokic gets the ball in the rebound, and guys are flying down the court. They know they're going to get a layup, because the guy's, more accurate than Aaron Rodgers, So
yeah, that makes players move because they're going to get. I mean, and that multiplies your threat. No matter how good you are, that multiplies your threat by 5 because no offense to anybody, but if you pass it to Kareem or Moses or McHale or Parrish or some guys like that, they're never passing it. They're going to score. So guys tended to stand around. But, when you're going to get it back, players going to move more. And, Joker, if you're open, he's going to find you and hit you.
Hey, but Mo, this has been a struggle for them, and they were pretty, I wouldn't say dominant in the West throughout the year, but they stayed at that number 1 seed really from the beginning to end. And a little later this season, they kind of stumbled. What has been their Achilles heel, so to speak? And do you think they're more vulnerable now than ever?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the West, right? So Denver has been the top of the West since day one, I think. But you look at, you look at the other top. Memphis is number 2 and Sacramento's number 3, right? So during the season, like the Suns, they made their trade late. The Lakers made trades late. The Golden State Warriors were a mystery for so long, and now they're coming their own. So, they struggled all season where Denver was on a pretty even keel of upward mobility and playing well. But now when you get into playoffs, it's a different animal. You have more time to prepare, more scouting reports, more adjustments need to be made. So it's a different animal than the regular season. And, quite frankly, I mean, Jamal Murray and the Joker have been phenomenal. It's their backup players that have struggled. And that's what, and, I don't agree with a lot of what Charles Barkley says, but he does make a great comment. Like, in the playoffs, great players will play great most of the time. So they're going to put up their numbers and play great, might have one off game or whatever. But it's the role players that are the ones that decide a lot of these series because they're the ones that step up. I mean, Shaman last game. He had 17 or 19 points from nowhere, and he was off the bench, and I think he hit 4 threes in the second half. And guys like that step up, that's who's gonna. And I don't think Denver has had that guy yet. I think it's been Michael Porter Jr. a little bit, but other than that, I don't know, who can or will step. I guess Aaron
Gordon.
Yeah, Aaron is supposed to, but he's been up and down and inconsistent. So,
and Gary, that's a good point, because I'm watching LeBron hustling, making hustle plays like he's 25. He doesn't do that during the regular season.
No.
He doesn't go in. He doesn't chase down the balls that he was chasing down.
Well, you know what? Maybe Paul can confirm this, but during the regular season, the superstars play at a high level, but I think emotionally they take it to another level once the playoffs begin. Like, they just elevate their game, that they become truly superstars. The other thing, getting back to Denver, I think their biggest problem, besides playing Phoenix in Booker, I mean, Booker has been maybe the best player in the playoffs. I mean, what is he shooting, like 75% from the field or whatever? I mean, he's been on fire. But if Denver has one major weakness, it's their interior defense. They don't have a rim protector. I mean, Jokic isn't, close to being a great interior defender. And Michael Porter doesn't seem to like to mix it up. So they get some, nice play out of Gordon. But to me, it's like Phoenix, when they need a basket, they attack the basket.
Yeah, and, Ayton is a true center, and he does protect the rim. And, he does take up space. And also, KD out there block shots. And you're right. And also the Joker is kind of a classic European, right? He doesn't want to get in no foul trouble. So I might not, and that's the way it is in Europe a lot. I mean, you want to stay in the game. So you let a lot of baskets go easily because you don't want to get in foul trouble. And that's kind of his mentality. I mean, take that opposite, right? And you saw it firsthand. Brook Lopez in Milwaukee, he goes after block shots and gets them and takes up space. At the same time, he's not worried about foul trouble either. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, when those guys are going to the rim, there's no one really there to stop them.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Gary.
No, you brought up Brook Lopez, and it's one of the craziest things I have ever seen in all the years I've covered the NBA. The guy never leaves his feet. It's not like he soars 5 feet off the ground to block the shot. He just stands there, extends his arms, and blocks shots, and around the cup, he's exceptional. The only issue with him is when they drop back, in coverage, and he doesn't come out. He's too slow to get out to the free throw line extended. And last year, Boston in the playoffs kind of exposed that, and certainly in the opening round of the playoffs this year, that was exposed again. So. I guess you can't have everything, right?
Yeah, but I agree. I've told Rickey this before, and there's some other people, and he's like, "Oh, that makes sense." If you're going to block a shot, you don't leave your feet till the shooter leaves his feet.
Right.
Because that's how you get into foul trouble and ball fakes and everything. And Brook doesn't leave his feet. And that, I think that frustrates a lot of people. But the one thing, and I remember in the playoffs, for the last few years, I don't understand. I mean, and I was a defensive guy coach. I don't understand why you have drop coverage. If your guy is slow,
I agree.
Your guy is slow. So when you teach basketball, if you're on defense and you're playing against a quick guy, you need to not give him more space to get more speed. You need to take away that space. And if you're asking me to guard Booker or Jamal Murray coming off a pick, and you're going to give him a 15-foot head start on me, that makes no. If I want to slow him down, if I was playing, I would tell the coaches, hey, let me be up and be aggressive and meet him at the pick. And then I can slow him down, or at least I got a chance to make him go around me, right? Because if I'm back here, he's just attacking me. I don't that seems like that's come in play the last 2 years, and I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. The slower you are, the more close you have to get to the defense to contain them.
Hey, Mo, I want to get to some of these comments and that people have and questions for you. Mark Eaton, our good friend, the late Mark Eaton. Steve says, good passer. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, and Mark was so big. I mean, when I guarded Mark, and I'm 7 foot, 289, whatever it was. When I guarded him, I would be behind him and trying to guard him, and I couldn't see anybody in front of me. I couldn't see who had the ball. I couldn't see who's coming down the floor. I had to literally like look around me when I was guarding him. He was that wide. But you're right, Steve, because he was a willing passer. He was a pass first guy, and he was up above everybody and could do drop passes and see the whole floor. He was an excellent passer also.
Your comment about Jack Sigma being a great passer.
Yeah, I mean, he was. I mean, he would do catch it in the post, like I said, and the guy would cut. And, usually going to do one of these or a little drop pass, and he would do a wraparound behind his back and the defender's back and pass it. And, that type of thing. He was a really good passer.
And this one can be for both of you guys. Are the Knicks the weakest league in the playoffs? I'll start with you, Gary.
Yeah, they probably are at this juncture. I think Thibodeau's done a fantastic job. I think every one of their players understood their roles. He had a rotation. They stayed healthy. They played hard, which all Thibodeau teams do. But I still think they're like one really good player away. I thought the acquisition of Josh Hart at midseason was, outstanding. He really kind of solidified that. And Hartenstein has, surprised quite a few people. I think when that pickup was made, they're like, what are they doing? Another dumb Knicks move. But he's been a really key piece off the bench. And, of course, Brunson is the guy that stirs the drink. I mean, if Brunson plays at a high level, the Knicks are pretty good. But, whether he can ever be a superstar, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was exciting for the Knicks to be in the playoffs. It was exciting for them to finally win a series in the playoffs. I don't know how many years it's been since they've actually won a series. But and they beat a really good young Cavs team that has some injury problems. But, Thibodeau's done a great job. He's kind of like the old angry guy out there. He looks like the old man, get off my lawn guy.
Yeah, like me.
Yeah, and me.
Yeah.
But the players they respect him because he has
they do.
respect. And I think, Brunson was, I've said this before, I was there in Dallas when they made one of the biggest mistakes in their franchise history when they let Steve Nash go as a free agent, and he was picked up by Phoenix and won 2 MVP awards. I think them letting Brunson go was just up there with that. Getting Kyrie Irving was a huge mistake in my opinion. But Brunson has turned into a superstar, and Julius Randle is kind of a triple-double kind of guy. Josh Hart is a better player than I thought. R.J. Barrett is a good young player. So what I'm trying to say is they need to stay the course, but I agree.
I agree.
They need 1 or 2 more players, and one has to be a big guy. It has to be a skilled, talented big guy that can help them in the paint. And, Toppin is still young, and he's athletic, and he can come along. So they have something to grow on. But to answer your question roundabout way is, at this point, I agree with Jerry. I think they're the weakest link in the playoffs that's still in there.
Okay, one more from the comment section, and then we'll get back to your comments in the second half of the show. Sigma's outside shot with the elbows. Jack did have a unique shot, Mo. Did you ever block it? No, I never seen anybody block it.
No, because Sigma had the Sigma move, right? It was to put it above your head, behind your head, and then shoot it. He could shoot it from right here behind his head. He could shoot it. So if you stepped up on him to contest that, he had one little step and he'd get to the basket. So, he has a Sigma move. Anybody that has a move, a sky hook, a drop, he's a finger roll. I mean, he's got a move, and it
Yeah.
was a good one. But he shot way behind his head, so that was really awkward. I wouldn't recommend anybody to do it, but it's very hard to block. And then he shot it up. So yeah, it's very hard to block.
Paul, who does that? I haven't seen anybody shoot it like Sigma does, but a guy that does sometimes is Jokic. Jokic has a real high release, and he'll bring his, arm back. But he's the only guy I can think of off the top of my head that's shot somewhat like Jack Sigma.
And the reason, I mean, if you bring it way back here, there's so much room for mistake. If you shoot it right here, there's little room for mistake. But if you bring it all the way back here, you got to go up like this.
Yeah.
Very hard. It's it's part of the reason. Like, no one does the sky hook anymore. Part of it because people lost the art form, but part of it is because it's freaking hard to shoot. You got to have a really nice touch, and Kareem could shoot out to 18 feet. So there's a reason for that. There's a reason why a lot of people don't shoot like Sigma or the Joker.
Yeah, and Mo, offensively, everybody says he's slow, but he's getting to where he needs to get to on the offensive end.
Well, let me see who was slow. McHale was slow. David Robinson was slow. Kiki Vanderway was slow. There's a lot of slow guys that could score 50 on you. So for him, it's about his size, his basketball IQ, and his footwork and his touch. I mean, he shoots floaters in the paint. People don't understand shooting a 15-foot floater. Very difficult. That takes a lot of touch, and he does it he takes that 1-2 step and stops in the lane before someone gets to him and shoots a little floater. That's a hard shot. So, being slow, if you're efficient, efficiency is the most important. You could be the fastest player in the world and not be able to get past anybody because you're not efficient with your footwork. Years ago, when I was with the Dallas Mavericks, we drafted Devin Harris from Wisconsin.
Sure.
And he was one of the fastest guys, quickest guys I've ever seen. He's probably faster than anybody I've ever seen with the ball getting from one end to the other. But he was always in 100 miles an hour. He was in top gear all the time, and he didn't understand. Yeah. And I told him one time, I said, first of all, you need to talk to Steve Nash. That's who you need to talk to, number one, and he did. And what Steve told him is that if you go 100 miles an hour every time, everyone can catch up to you and play it. It's like a pitcher throwing only fastballs. Eventually, they're going to catch up to you unless you throw a changeup or slider. So or curve, and it's the same thing. And then I told him, you got to whatever Steve Nash does, you should do. If he gets up at 8, you should get up at 8. If he lifts weight at 10, you should lift weights at 10. If he eats waffles for breakfast, you should eat waffles for breakfast. Yeah. You should be right where he is every time. And to his credit, Devin Harris had a 10 or 12 or 14-year career because he did get that. But being fast didn't help him. Changing speeds helped him.
Yeah. Hey, let's get to the Suns series. Pretty much know where this next series going. Your thoughts on how this Suns Nuggets series will play out, and I also want to play this that happened the other night.
Man was here with them for 5 years. Hard to believe he'll be gone. Going to be strange to walk into this building and not see his smiling face as Phoenix turns it over. Now, boy, Jokic, a little bit of contact. Boy, that potentially could get dangerous.
I think Jokic was just trying to get the basketball from.
Your thoughts on that, Mo, and then you, Gary.
Well, number one, the Joker's done stuff like this before, right? So he's going over there in the guise of trying to get the ball and inbound. The fact of the matter is, the referees would not let him inbound it because there's a Suns player on the ground that went in the stands. So he's not going to be able to get the ball and inbound it quickly. And most of the players were back anyway. Now, the owner of the Suns is the guy that got the ball. And for people that don't know that, he was a walk-on at Michigan State, playing
Yeah, I
basketball
covered
at
him.
Michigan State. And, he's a big Michigan State booster and is now a billionaire because of his mortgage business. So, he's no stranger to being in the action. And if you watch really well, he did a really good job of imitating an NBA flop, right? He put his hands up and he threw that like someone hit him hard.
That's what Dick Steve said.
The guy that touched him, the guy that was holding the beer that got kicked out, he had actually reached out and touched Jokic on the shoulder, and he should have been kicked out, and he was. Now, grabbing the ball from a fan, owner or not, is a no-no, by the way. And then not throwing, but reaching out your arm a little bit where you are. You did contact him in the chest, right? So that's a no-no too. You're not supposed to do that. It got blown out of proportion. He was fined $25,000. You don't care about that. I don't think he should have been suspended. That would have been a travesty to do that. But what his comment after the game was, well, someone touched me and I thought the NBA was supposed to protect me. Yeah, they are. But you're not also supposed to go reach for a ball and take it from a fan, owner or not. You're supposed to let the ref do it. That's not your job. So, I go back and forth on that. The thing that saved him, by the way, from being suspended is he was still on the court. He was on the court. He wasn't in the stands. So if he was 4 feet farther and he was in the stands, he would have absolutely been suspended because after the Malice in the Palace and all that stuff, and I've seen a lot of it. I've seen McHale go after someone behind a Bucks bench in the playoffs. That's a supreme no-no. And if he wouldn't have been on the court and he would have stepped in the stands, he would have been suspended. So I think how it worked out was fine. I don't know how you could give him a technical though. I mean, what is the call? You get technical for verbal, for physical, for non-basketball play. I guess it was a non-basketball play, maybe. I don't know what that was.
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't know. What do you think, Gary?
And Garrett, to Isfia's credit, he said today, hey, I hope this guy doesn't get suspended. I want the Suns to win, but I don't want the Joker to be suspended.
If there was anybody in that scrum that I thought was going to get down and dirty, it was Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah. What was he doing there, Gary?
That was probably the best behavior I've ever seen from him in a lifetime.
Well, here's your scoop, right? He's sitting next to
the owner.
Yeah,
he was to the right of the owner. And it was like, wait a second, Isaiah turning down a chance to get into a fight? Yeah. So that was crazy. But, I basically echo everything Paul said. I mean, they fined him. Let's move on. It probably was blown out of proportion. But, the playoff basketball, that doesn't surprise me. You brought up an interesting point, Paul, though, about Kevin McHale. I was at that game when he went after the fan, and I'm trying to recall what the fan was tackling him for the most part, right?
The fan was that lawyer that used to sit behind the bench with the long hair. He looked like Sonny Bono.
Yes,
and,
yes.
And my wife Linda was actually, that's where her seats were, behind the visitors bench, and she was holding our little son Michael at that time, and she was a little scared when Kevin stepped over the bench and went after that guy. I think he tried to choke him out, I think.
Wow. Hey, we got some more comments, and we appreciate everybody's input that we will get to a little later in the show. I want to move on to the upcoming game at 10 o'clock. I think they tip off at 10 or 10:30 tonight. The Warriors and the Lakers series, guys. The Lakers went up 2-1 the other night. I mentioned LeBron hustling like he only does in the playoffs, which at this age, I don't really blame him. And a really interesting series, Mo, because the Lakers started 2-10. They were 3-13 at one point. and now they got a chance to get to the Western Conference Finals. Your thoughts, Mo, and then go to Gary.
Well, they're tied 2-2 now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is game 5. It's a pivotal game, and it's a good series. And
no, the Lakers are up 2-1, aren't they?
You're right. Lakers are up by.
Lakers are up 2-1.
Oh, okay. So they're up 2-1. So this.
And they got this game in LA tonight.
Yeah. So I hate the word must win, but if the Warriors even this out at 2-2 and go back to Golden State, that's a problem. So the Lakers are on that. But the Lakers started terrible. They had a terrible team. They had a bad roster. Besides injuries, Westbrook never fit in, would never fit in. And then they had a lot of older guys that didn't play any defense. And, it was a bad fit roster. And then, to their credit, they made moves. They got D'Angelo Russell. They picked up Vanderbilt. They've picked up Hachimura. All guys that are better players and fit in great with what they're doing. And then Dennis Schroeder has stepped up in the playoffs. And AD, it depends on his availability, so it's a great matchup. My concern with the Warriors is it's not Curry, it's not Clay. Draymond is not the old Draymond, but he is what he is, Looney is. But guys like Wiggins and Poole, who are supposed to step up, like the last game in Sacramento, they looked like the keys. They dribbled off their foot. They couldn't make a shot. So those two guys scare me because they need to step up for the Warriors to get back control of this series. So this game tonight is going to be interesting to see if they do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You figure the Warriors are going to win because if you look at the series, Anthony Davis plays one great game, one bad game, one great game. So tonight you should have a bad game.
If you're a betting man.
Yeah. I mean, when he came into the league and I saw him after a year or two, I thought Anthony Davis had a chance to go down as one of the greatest power forwards in the history of the game. I mean, the guy's just an incredible talent, but he's been injury plagued. I have questions about his focus, his intensity, and this series to me is like a microcosm of his career. He's a Hall of Famer on one night and a very ordinary player on another night.
And
that's
the worst thing you can be. Like Don Nelson, when I first came to the Bucks years ago, he made a statement. He said, "Be who you are every night." So, don't be a 20 and 10 guy one night and then be an 8 and 4 guy the next night. Be a 12 and 6 guy every night. So I can depend on you. And you're right. AD is like, he's up and down. And I swear, I watched that game the other day. I think his knee got banged. He got poked in the eye. His head hurt. His shoulder got hurt. His finger, everything. And yep. I'm telling you, I'm going to count tonight how many times he hits the ground. I mean,
what's the over-under?
And he hits it hard. He falls hard. I told people this, Gary. There's players that you got to know how to fall. Guys that fell hard, AD, Dwayne Wade fell hard.
Sure.
Guys fall. You got to learn how to fall. And he, you could hear it on the TV when he hits the ground. It's like boom.
Hey Mo, if you're coaching him, what do you say about that roller coaster ride? Is there any explanation for that?
What you say is nothing because you can't do anything about it. I mean, it's just late in his career. He is what he is. So you're going to have to, and as a coaching staff, if you have the guts, then you're going to see his bad game and you're not going to play him as much if you have someone else to play in the spot, which I'm not so sure the Lakers have at this point. They're not deep enough. But, you can, rest him certain times and go smaller and have LeBron play the 5 and do stuff like that. But you can't tell him, hey, you know what, you played a great game and then you play a bad game, are you eating something different? Are you doing, she's going to tell you to go jump in a lake. So,
yeah.
you just, the adjustment you can make is minutes is how you can make it.
Well, I think this is a pivotal series for the Warriors. I mean, there's been a lot of chatter about what's going to happen to Draymond Green after this season. What are they going to do with some of those younger kids? Kuminga hasn't developed probably the way he should have. Klay Thompson wants a lot of money. And there's been a lot of chatter about Bob Myers, the highly successful general manager, whether he's coming back or not. And I was told today by an impeccable source, he said there's no way Bob Myers is coming back. And he's the general manager of this outfit. So if he doesn't come back, then what happens to that organization? Who takes his place? Is that new general manager going to have the same views as Myers did? I think this is a really important series for that team.
You think they break this team up, Gary?
If they lose, I think they're going to make some moves. Yeah, I don't have any doubt about it, especially, if Myers is gone. I think they have to do something.
Yeah, and I think, my buddy Steve Kerr is
Gary, this is for you.
Is going to have a thing. But let me answer this. So, and also, Gary, you can answer this, but the new collective bargaining agreement, Golden State Warriors are one of the highest spending teams. They spend over the cap, like almost $200 million a year, over the cap. So, once they're over the cap, and they're going to be limited to do that. So, in my opinion, I don't think they're going to blow this team up, but I think the guy that's going to be out is Draymond Green, because quite frankly, he's not as good as he used to be. He can be a headache, and then you're going to have to decide. You've already paid Poole, so you're going to have to decide on Kuminga and Wiggins. I think you've already paid Wiggins too, so you're going to have to move around your roster. And if I'm looking at that roster, I got Curry, I got Klay, Poole, Looney, DiVincenzo, Kuminga, Wiggins, Peyton II, Draymond Green's the odd man out to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I heard this last year that Draymond actually wanted to go to the Lakers, that he wants to play with LeBron. So I could see that happening. Somehow, some way, they'll figure out a way to get him there. And it'll be a great move for the Warriors. Like Paul said, he's clearly lost a step. He's not, close to being the Draymond Green we've seen in the past. And I think it would do wonders for that locker room too. To be honest with you, I think a lot of those players have tired of his act.
Probably tired of it.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, I don't know if you saw this early.
At some point,
hold on this second part.
At some point, you're a headache, but your talent is up here. At some point, your headache beats your talent. Just ask Dylan Brooks.
Yes.
You see this, Steve sends this in. This is for Gary. Brewers beat the Dodgers 9-1. So that should put a smile on your face.
Wow. How about those Brewers? That's incredible. Paul, you're talking about the Golden State Warriors payroll. How about the Dodgers payroll? Some of these baseball teams, are just, they're astronomical. But, getting back to the Warriors, again, I think this is a critical stage in that franchise.
And you know what? Let me just get this in right quick, Mo, because Mo and I were talking about Cam Newton a few weeks ago. He had a workout, and he looked good in the workout. He's only 33, and it's no doubt he's at least at worst a backup quarterback in the league. But nobody wants Cam because nobody wants. What do you say, Mo? The headache is not worth the talent.
In pro sports, any sport, if you have a backup that makes too much money, is a headache or not, that's a problem. You don't want a backup quarterback that thinks he's a starter and is a bad locker room. You don't want that. You want a backup like me that's ready to play, can perform and not a problem.
Yeah. Can you imagine? The Packers obviously need a veteran backup quarterback. There's a lot of talk about they're going to bring one in. But can you imagine Cam Newton in Green Bay with his flashy wardrobe? I think that would open some eyes in Titletown.
and he's wondering why nobody wants to sign him. But speaking of Milwaukee, let's get to the Bucks And Mo talks about these coaches being fired, these coach of the year, former coach of the year guys. I know 3 that went down this year: Casey, Nurse, and Budenholzer in Milwaukee. Your thoughts on his firing, Gary? First and foremost, and then let's get into what happened with the Bucks, who looked fantastic at one time during the season. I remember, I think they went like 2 weeks without losing a game, won 16, 17 games in a row.
Yeah, I got a high regard for Budenholzer as a coach. I think his track record speaks for itself. I mean, the last 5 years, he's won more games than any coach in the NBA. And if you go back to last season, the Bucks could have easily defended their title, but Middleton got hurt. Do you remember that in the Boston series?
Yeah.
And he didn't play in the Boston series. I mean, if they have Middleton, you know, they have a pretty good chance of winning that series, I believe, and going on and win the title. What if he wins back-to-back titles? And now this year, you know, everybody has heard about how his brother was killed in the car crash, right? And I think that happened after Game 3, if I believe, or prior to Game 4, and you could tell he was not with it. In fact, I talked to a close friend of Budenholzer's who lives on the West Coast, and said he was watching the game, and they had a close-up on Mike, and he said to his wife, he goes, "What's wrong with him?" You know, I mean, he could discern that, you know, just watching the game. So I think he was the fall guy. Somebody had to be the fall guy, but the guy who I thought got a free pass and is continuing to get a free pass is Giannis. And Paul and I talked about this a little bit. Ricky, you know how many free throws he missed in that Game 5?
Yeah. He has not gotten a free pass on this show.
but I mean, the total was 13. He missed 13 free throws. And today, or, you know, actually since that happened, I've been thinking, like, when's the last time any player missed 13 free throws in a elimination game, much less any player missing 13 free throws? So I decided to call the Elias Sportsbook in New York, right? The last time somebody missed 13 or more free throws in an elimination game was 2 decades ago.
Who was it? Who was it?
You want to take a stab at that?
So it's 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Shaq?
You know, that's who I thought too, Paul. But no. Think in terms of Detroit.
Detroit.
Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace.
Ben Wallace.
Yeah, Ben Wallace. And get this, in the history of the NBA, only one other person has done that, where they missed more than
Will Chamberlain.
Will Chamberlain, correct.
I know.
So when you think of it, 13 free throws, that's an awful lot of free throws. They lost by a point, you know?
Yeah, that wow. I should have known that about Ben because I covered those series.
And I agree with you, Gary. And I've said this on our show and said this to people. Listen, Giannis, I love his attitude, his toughness, all that stuff, his story. But he is an MVP with the most holes in his game than anyone I've ever seen. He's a terrible free throw shooter. He's a bad 3-point shooter, and he drives to the basket and doesn't have a mid-range game and is a bad passer. And he's an MVP. I mean, I don't understand, and I'm sorry, but I worked out 3 post-grad kids, 19 and 20 years old today, and we worked on free throws. We worked on driving to the basket under control and pulling up. We worked on driving to the basket, kicking out to the shooter. We worked on all that stuff today. And if I had Giannis here for a month in the summer, that's what I would work on him with him. But you got to, I mean, I played against some great players, and like Michael Jordan, maybe the best player ever. When he first came in the league, he was a terrible shooter with no 3-point range. And he worked on his game, and he became one. he was a bad passer. He became a better passer. And then later in his game, he worked on his post game in the triangle. He was a good post-up guy. So Giannis needs to start working on his weaknesses. Why isn't anybody saying, hey, Giannis, we got to work on your free throws. You know that routine you do? Let's throw that out. Throw that out the window now and start over and come up with a simpler routine. And let's work on your decisions on going to the basket and pulling up. And let's work on your three-point shooting so you're more consistent. How about that?
Mo, can you become a great free throw? Can you make yourself a great free throw shooter?
You can, not a great free throw shooter, but you can make yourself a respectable one. There's a lot of guys in the history of the NBA that were 20 and 25 and maybe 30% free throw shooters that worked on it and became 60%. And that's all he has to do is become 60%, right? Then he misses 8 free throws instead of 13 and they win the game.
Yeah, absolutely. The only guy I can think of, a big guy though, that made and I wouldn't say it was a radical or a quantum leap, was Jack Sikma. When he was in Seattle, he shot in the, believe maybe high 70s, low 80s, and he came to Milwaukee, and I think it was Del Harris who might have worked with him. I'm not sure, but I think it was. But he shot 90%, and he won the NBA free throw title. So it can be done with the proper coaching, the proper willingness to succeed. And, you look at Giannis, there's no reason, none at all, for him not to be a good free throw shooter.
And have a pull-up game. I mean, you can have a pull-up game and a decision to pass. You can work on that absolutely. Yes. The problem is a lot of these great players, like Shaq. Shaq was a horrible free throw shooter, and he tried to work on it with some other people. But like Rick Barry suggested, the underhand free throw, which is a very efficient way to do it if you're taught right. But it didn't look cool enough for him. And a lot of players like Giannis or whoever think I'm good enough now. Why would I, want to break down my free throw routine and do it all over again? Well, guess what? One of the best golfers ever, Tiger Woods, broke down, gave up on his swing, and started all over again and became even better. So that's what you should do.
Well, maybe you should pull a Mason Plumlee. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, shoot left-handed.
Shoot him left-handed.
Yeah. He shoots right and left. If it goes in left, he stays in the left.
Yeah, exactly.
Or he could do what they do in Korea. When I went over to work with Samsung in Korea, this was 10 years ago. They all bank in their free throws. All bank in their free throws.
Hey Mo, is there anything to you hear this about the European players being better shooters and more fundamentally sound than the American players?
Well, there's something to that because growing up when they're teenagers, they do more training than playing games. And here in the United States, when you're a teenager, you play 8 million games during the summer and you don't train as much. So that's where that comes from. So the fundamental training is what Europe has focused on for years, and playing basketball games in the AAU, and doing your own thing and playing 3 games in a day is what most of the American players tend to do. So that's, in my opinion, that's a huge part of why it's thought that European players are more skilled than American players, especially the bigs.
And it was one play early in the Knicks game tonight. I forget the player from the Knicks has a fast break, and he goes down, and Jimmy Butler's coming from an angle to contest him, and the kid, I forgot the I can't remember who's announcing this game. Anyway, the guy from the Knicks tried to cock it back and dunked it, and which gave Butler time to get there and block it. You guys probably saw it. And the announcer said if he just goes in and dunks the ball, he's going to beat Butler and maybe get the 3-point play.
But if you just do that and do a little quick dunk, you don't get on ESPN highlights. So what good is it? You're not on YouTube. Come on, man. That's what it's all about.
Hey, Paul, I've asked a few other former players this question. and I got varying responses. We're talking about theatrics. When Giannis goes and makes a slam dunk or some spectacular play, he'll go into his quote mean mug look,
Yeah.
and he'll run down the court and give you that mean mug look. If that would have happened when you were playing, I mean, today everybody thinks it's cool that it slides. What do you think would have happened if he did that, especially to another player, where he looked him in the face and showed him up like that?
Well, a not so smart player back in the day probably would have punched him in the face right away. But a smart player back in the day, like yours truly, would have remembered that and found a time to give him a little elbow to the gut, or just to remind him that, or if he goes up, I'm gonna foul him extra hard. Just remind him, that. But that I would probably be ejected with a flagrant 27. Barred from the league forever if I did it. I mean, it's just a different game, and no, it's so touchy. Touches and any hard foul is reviewed and that thing and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
Back in the day, you just got up and shot your free throws.
Yeah.
But now, watch, they lay down like they're dead. They lay down like they're dead. I think they should change that rule, man. I mean, like they had a review the other day. I can't remember who it was. It might have been AD or somebody. I don't know. And he went up to the basket. He got fouled hard, and they reviewed it. But when you look at the review, after he got fouled, he laid on the ground and grabbed his head like this and everything. And when you look at the review, he wasn't even hitting the head. No one hit him in the head. So actually, he should be teed up for that.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man.
Hey, speaking of old school, Gary, you have a project that you're working on about one of the game's greatest players, the one and only Magic Johnson. Talk about that. Talk about your woeful press box, and some of the other stuff you got going on.
Yeah, a gentleman by the name of Roland Lazenby is probably the foremost sports author in America. He's written New York Times bestsellers on Michael Jordan, on Kobe Bryant, and he asked me about, it's almost 3 years ago, if I would assist him in writing a book on Magic Johnson. And having known Roland and having known his credentials, I jumped at the opportunity. It's just been fabulous. I think I've interviewed between probably 50 or 60 people who have known Magic in some capacity, whether it's a teammate, an opponent, a coach, a fan. And the book is finally wrapped up, and it's going to be coming out in September. And I think if you're a Magic Johnson fan in particular, you're going to absolutely love this book.
When's it coming out, Gary?
In September.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, no, it's I'm really looking forward to it. And again, I mean, we go back to when Magic was a child and all his trials and tribulations that he experienced, growing up in Michigan, and then the transformation of going to Los Angeles. Just to show you how times have changed, when Magic got to Los Angeles, he put his name in the phone book. They don't even have phone books anymore, do they?
Hey, Mo, you competed against Magic. Talk about what it was like going against those great Lakers teams. With your Bucks teams always matched up pretty well against, but just the whole thing about when you had to deal with Magic Johnson.
Well, first of all, you can ask him if he remembers when Kansas University came in to play him at Michigan State, and they kicked our butts all over the floor, even though we were like the number one ranked team or something. I remember that, him and Greg Kelser and Jay Vincent, I think. But he kind of, I mean, there's no, I don't know, Gary, you might, but in my opinion, there's no question that Magic Johnson and Larry Bird saved the NBA. And the NBA wouldn't be what it is now if it wasn't for them, because back then the NBA was struggling. They were not even on live TV. They were delayed TV. and there was fights and drugs and all this stuff, and no one really was interested. And then they came in the league together and had a rivalry and were freaking good, as good as anybody in the league, and that rejuvenated the league. And part of that was, a lot of it was on the court, but a lot of it was off the court, their persona. Larry was the country boy and, down to earth, and Magic was the all smiles and showtime. And, so that alone, every NBA player in today's game that's making 20, 30, 40, 50 million a year should be giving them some money on, here's $5 million from me for a thank you. Yeah. But with Magic, I mean, he was so unique because he's 6'9", legitimate 6'9". He's as tall as Larry Bird, and we probably played at 230 or something, and he could handle it like a point guard and see over everybody and back people in. And he talk about a great passer. And I've told people this before. He knew the game. So if I have Kurt Rambis as my forward and I need him to rebound, dive on the floor, and play defense, you know how you get him to do that? I pass him the ball 4 or 5 times for layups in the first quarter, and he gets 8 or 10 points, and I never pass to him again because now I'm going to give it to Cream and the rest of them, and he's going to rebound and play defense the rest of the game and be happy about it. And Magic knew all that. He knew what, in my opinion, become like quarterback in the NFL. I don't know goalie in hockey, but point guard coming in the NBA as a point guard is the hardest job because you have to have skill. You have to guard the best players, but you also have to be a monitor of egos, and you got to know who to give the ball. Everyone, hey, Rickey, I'm open. Hey, Rickey, no, I'm open. No, I'm open. I need more shots. And you got to be able to play that game, and Magic did it as well as anybody.
And Mo, didn't you almost become a Laker?
When I was cut by Cleveland, I had about 5 teams, and the Lakers had called, but they had Kareem and they had Mitch Kupchak. But then when I looked at the Bucks roster, they had Harvey Catchings as a 4 or 5, but then they had Bob Lanier, who I thought, in 2 or 3 years he's going to retire, and then maybe I can move into that spot. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great, Gary. And hey man, we certainly appreciate everybody's questions and comments. Always a great show with so much knowledge. Thank you, Julio.
Thanks, Coach. He's an awesome. That's Coach.
And Gary, what about the Woeful Press Box and your work for Lindy's?
Yeah, I do write for Lindy's Pro Basketball Magazine, which I think is the best pro basketball magazine out there. And I also have my own website, which I started up a few years ago, called Woeful's Press Box. And I will be doing a story in the next day or so on Giannis's free throw shooting woes. So you might want to check that out. But yeah, no, this is fantastic. I love your show, and I'm just thrilled to have been a part of it tonight.
Well, okay. There's not many people more knowledgeable about the game and about especially professional basketball, and a nicer guy to have you on. So we talk all the time. Hopefully you'll be out here this July and we can grab lunch together.
Oh, absolutely.
And Gary, when the book comes out, definitely come back. Mo, we want to get this in before we go too. I promise I will come back from it. The Hall of Famer Artis Gilmore, who's been a guest on our show, one of the many Hall of Famers we've had on this show. Mo, how strong was the A train?
Too strong. No. I mean, the strongest guys, Bob Lanier was one of the strongest guys. Daryl Dawkins, when he was mad, was one of the strongest guys. Mark Eaton was one of the strongest guys. But Artis Gilmore was scary strong. And there's a couple stories about Artis, like just a great guy. But two things, like when I was a rookie, I think, or my second year in the league, we were playing in San Antonio. It was in San Antonio. And for some reason, I accidentally got my elbow up and I caught him with an elbow. And I was running down the floor apologizing profusely. I didn't mean that, Artis. I didn't mean that. Because back then, we were going to fight. And he looked at me and said, don't worry about it, young fellow. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And the other thing learned about this early on in my career. Never, ever shake Artis Gilmore's hand before a game, because he would crush it. He would just get you in a hold and he would crush it. He was so strong. And that's where this started. The pound started because no one wanted to shake Artis's hand. That's what started.
that is a great.
Hey, Ricky, real quickly, if I could interject.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're talking about Artis Gilmore in the book we're putting out on Magic. I don't know if you guys remember this, but they had a coin flip between the Lakers and the Bulls to see who could have the number one pick when Magic was coming out, right? And, of course, the Lakers obviously won it. But Artis Gilmore was on that Bulls team at the time, and I interviewed him for this book, and I said to him, how many titles do you think you would have won if you had Magic on your team? And he goes, a lot.
That's for sure. Yeah.
I mean, this is the National Basketball Association. And like you said, Mo, we can thank Magic and Larry for propelling it to where we are today. And even today's games, there's stuff we don't like about it. But this is still a great time of the year to cheer for your teams and watch some of the greatest athletes in the world. But Gary, we won't keep you any longer, man. This has been a great hour. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And of course, you can catch this and all our past shows on Believe.com. That's BLEAV.com, and anywhere you get your podcast. For our guest, Gary Woelfel. Thank you, Gary. And Big Mo, thank you, sir. I'm Rickey Hampton. Peace, everybody.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Paul. Guys. Thank you, Ricky.
Have a great evening.